Damn, what is up, my internet friends? Welcome to Walking and Talking, the show where I walk and talk. Take a seat, settle in, dopaminergically bond with me for a few minutes. Look, it's your old pal, your trusty friend. Sweet relief. You can stop, trying to make sense of your own life and just defer all that to me for 4 hours. Let me do all the thinking. No, there's no need for you, to do all the work of actualizing your fullest potential in life. Just defer that to me for 4 hours. Take it easy. Honestly, this has me thinking a bit about under what various circumstances you might be in. And I feel, mentally and emotionally. Under what circumstances have you come here? What might you be looking for in walking and talking? And I just imagine the sorts of things that I would find myself looking for when I open up YouTube. How many times do I just go and get on the internet for no particular reason? Probably a disturbing amount. So I suppose that, whoa, there's a big ass cluster of lanternflies, but I suppose that as I transition from sort of a task mode of thinking into something else, which is what tends to happen in these videos, for now I need a provisional justification for doing what I'm doing. That is, trying to think about what sort of service I could be providing here, trying to justify what I'm doing in terms of the benefit to sentience in the long haul of things.
In Napoleon Dynamite.
Hi. What was I saying? Oh yeah, so I'm imagining you getting on YouTube because you're tired. You're tired of thinking. You're tired of feeling yourself. It gets exhausting. I know. There's all this noise going on in my head, and I'm like, fuck this. Let me hand it over to somebody who I think could help me or something like that in some way, or at least just help me not have to deal with all this noise in my head for some time. There might be a physiological state that I am kind of, to varying degrees, conscious of, and I might be reacting to it aversely. That is, just to put that a little more simpler, like in some way or another I could just be feeling not ideal, sub-ideal, and that could, you know, vary in degree and in type. You know, there could be some sort of like intense kind of issue that keeps nagging at me. Some component of being that feels really off, confusing. I don't know what the solution is. There's something causing some discomfort, but I can kind of escape it or take my mind off of it by watching a YouTube video. But I think often underneath that mental activity, there's like something, there's something physiological going on that drives that kind of like avoiding type of action. I mean, if something seems bad, I'm thinking about, maybe it relates to some physiological state of being like kind of tense, or could be some, you know, more elevated than necessary amount of adrenaline going on, or some kind of background adrenaline level. I mean, that's one possible scenario. Or it could be torpor. I'm just like tired out mentally or physically. Don't have enough energy to like do something, to really do something, you know, meaningful or productive or something, but I'm not quite ready to sleep. So it's like, yeah, find something that's at some level that I can engage with, that will alleviate uncomfortable feelings. I don't know. It's, maybe I should also attempt to imagine like a more positive scenario of you coming here and being here. I mean, not that what I'm describing necessarily has to be thought of as a negative thing, actually, but yeah, I don't know. I guess I would always, I think I would usually have to say, I don't know. that when I am coming to YouTube, it's common that I don't feel at that moment as aligned with like my core purpose of being as at some other times. Say for instance, when I'm actually making this video or doing something else and engaging my creativity in a challenging way, in some other way, or something like that. But it's not black and white. Maybe I could be, I don't know. It's certainly true that I've encountered a lot of stuff on YouTube that seems to feed in and stimulate and stir up and keep active my thinking, at least. But also, it's such a treacherous landscape of dopaminergic traps that you're treading in dangerous territory. You know what I'm saying? It's you're engaging with an environment that is specifically designed to hijack your attention and keep your eyes on the screen so that you can, so that ultimately that you can be shown advertisements which are very specifically designed to influence your thinking in a way that is beneficial for the person or organization that is paying for the advertisement. You have to realize that is kind of the material lifeblood of this media platform. Miraculously enough, we do have the option not to monetize, not to show ads. Although I was finding this thing that there were these ads being shown at the beginning of stuff. There's an oyster mushroom. Here's an advertisement for oyster mushrooms. Eat delicious oyster mushrooms. They're free. I was seeing some ads being shown on my videos, even that weren't monetized, I think, like at the beginning. There was like a faded out image of the ad, a still image, and then there was like a button that said like play ad before these videos. I don't know what that's about, or if it will continue, but I mean, and on the other hand, for this platform to exist in a way that you can use it essentially for free is kind of miraculous. I mean, just considering the fact that I can upload this amount of content without paying for that to make it available to anybody with the internet and have it be optional whether I allow ads on the videos or not. That's pretty remarkable. I don't take that for granted. But nonetheless, it's very much an environment where everyone is competing for your attention. Everyone is competing to have some influence on your mind and your thinking and thereby your behavior. Even me, in a way, you know? And so how are you going to discern? I mean, are you first of all, are you actually making any attempt to keep that reality in mind when you're navigating this media landscape? Like, are you even, how cognizant are you of these types of biases and ulterior motives and drives that are influencing to an overwhelming degree the types of content that's being presented to you? How aware of you are that? Of that, first of all. And then, if you are aware of that, which I'm sure a lot of you are, particularly if you're watching this, then it's like, to what extent do you kind of fall into the sort of dopaminergic, limbic, attentional pathways that are being set before you? That is, how often do you go on YouTube, maybe with a purpose in mind? Maybe you're like, I'm going to watch this. You open up YouTube, you got this page that shows you a bunch of thumbnails. You got a sidebar showing you all these thumbnails. And then you end up clicking on something that has nothing to do with your original intention. And so your attention gets sidelined from its original objective. And I'm not saying that's a 100% negative thing, but I do think overall it's like a scattering. It has a diffusing impact on your attention, your ability to think about things in a comprehensive and continuous manner. You know, like sometimes you have to dedicate an amount of time to focus on anything in order to make any, you know, significant progress about thinking about something, to learn something significant. as well as just like to understand yourself better and to be able to develop yourself better, to be able to do things like think clearly and make wise decisions. And so not only is there this like mental scattering effect of you sort of falling into all these disparate information streams very rapidly, and a lot of times presenting information in an overly simplified way in a short amount of time. But then there's also there's like the emotional regulation aspect of all this as well, as in for instance, if there is some unaddressed emotional need that leads towards you or coming to YouTube, YouTube is really designed to exploit that and form addictive behavior of moving from stimulus to stimulus and giving you these dopamine hits that in the very short term distract you from that in the very short term could make you feel better, and then in the long term form an addictive behavior, because in the long term because they don't, address your needs in a substantial or sustainable way, not in a way that leads you towards having more autonomy, more sovereignty, more ability to self-regulate your emotions in varying circumstances and situations, and a deeper insight into yourself. And in fact, it's probably deleterious to that type of development. Because it's not just a matter of getting more and more information. It's what's more important are pretty like core capacities to of like making sense out of things, and of, I don't know, to have, to be able to think for yourself, essentially, is what I'm saying. to be able to sort through all the just, you know, sort through all this information and discern what in there is meaningful and what is simply a distortion that is brought about by all these various types of biases and ulterior motives that influence what information is presented and how it's presented. And this is pretty important because it has a big effect on how you operate in the rest of the world as well, in other aspects of your life, not only in online interaction. Whoa. Look at these purple shrooms. Woo! What are these? They are so purple. I'm gonna have to check these out on the way back. Because, you know, we're not gonna get... We're gonna attempt here to stay focused. Whatever exactly that means. I have to keep walking swiftly here because if I stop walking swiftly, a cloud of mosquitoes is gonna descend upon me and suck me dry. At times, it can feel kind of impossible to see an alternative way of operating. And what I mean by that is if you have not had a significant experience of an emotional topography that is not all tied up in these kind of addictive neurotransmitter patterns. And so I mean like for instance, the way you might be there might be kind of like a gravitational emotional draw towards watching, I don't know, a whole bunch of really short YouTube videos of whatever it is, I don't know, fear pong or I can't even think of what people watch. I don't mean to like single out and deride any particular YouTube form. Although I am kind of, in a way, I am kind of like deriding in general a lot of things. And I guess I do mean to deride like a very ubiquitous form of relating to each other that manifests very ferociously on YouTube and other online platforms. And I'll try to explain more of that as we go along here. If you feel this gravitational emotional pull towards watching certain types of media, has this like shaping effect on your emotional topography. That is like, you know, one video is going to give you a little boost and you're going to feel some form of happiness or pleasure from seeing it. But then that's kind of coupled with a kind of discomfort after it ends, is you have to pull yourself away from, you have to work against gravity, like when the video ends and then there's another one on autoplay just about to come up. Is there this uncomfortable feeling that maybe there's something else you could be doing that could be more conducive to, let's say, something like a more fully engaged life? A lot more interesting mushrooms here. Or maybe in my case, sometimes I have that feeling, but I don't know where to start. I don't know what to do. You know, a feeling of not knowing what to do with my life. And so, like, an uncomfortable feeling of not knowing what to do. But and then engaging with media, because in some ways it does, in some ways through the media that we choose to engage with, like there's some version of what we're looking for in there that comes to us. Like maybe if we're feeling some kind of meaningless, like we get some kind of dose of meaning through some media. You know, like that's like a half-hour sitcom. You know? A tried and tested formula over the decades. It's like you have this little vignette where you can very much predict in your favorite sitcom that character or a group of characters are going to face a dilemma in life, a problem, some form of crisis, and that some form of resolution will come to that problem by the end of the half hour. And you'll be able to get you'll be able to understand some form of meaning in that. It'll present to you like a little narrative of life onto which you can probably project in some way some of your own problems and dilemmas, and thus feel some kind of meaning. But that feeling comes from the watching of this representation of the solving of a problem, and it is not the solving of your problem. It doesn't do anything for that. I don't know. Or like to the extent that it, I don't know. I could be totally wrong here. I could be like, there could be this other interpretation of this that I think is also valid, that these fictions are and stories are a very important part of our society, of forming intersubjective value systems and collective meaning. Media is presenting and serving to form and maintain our collective narratives. So I guess what the problem, and so like that in itself isn't inherently bad. I'm not saying you can't enjoy things. But what I see as the dilemma, I suppose, is that if we cannot question the main collective narratives that we have, that we're using to make sense out of life, if we're so completely enraptured and absorbed by like the present dominant collective narratives about what life is and what makes life meaningful, and all sorts of things, like how can we be happy and fulfilled, and what is valuable in life, and all this stuff, what morality is, all these important things. And we're so enraptured in the current, like, dominant thing, which is the one that's generally portrayed and supported by the most popular forms of media. Then we miss the opportunity to try and find better narratives, more adequate ones, more adequate values, because it's unquestionable that the world is quickly changing. Man, all of these purple mushrooms, they're so slippery. And in my mind, I'm wondering if there are that one species of psilocybin that does grow in this region. I don't know. Like the material basis of our society is changing, like the ways in which we just kind of stay materially alive, and many of the ways that we thought about those things are proving themselves to, they're starting to fall apart because they were never really sustainable in the first place. And, you know, ideologically, a lot of our widely cherished values are starting to crack up, and which is you know, it's like evident in kind of various breakdowns that we see occurring and conflicts that are occurring and just becoming what seems like, I don't know, maybe I'm I could be focusing too much on the present moment, as in like the past few years, or this year in particular. Toad. But even as I say all of this, I'm becoming aware of the narrative that I'm presenting, which I'm by no means sure of this as an objective truth, as in I'm beginning to sound like I'm portraying a world that's falling apart, that was, I don't know. It's changing, that's for sure, but what's new? Hasn't it always been changing? And it's also interesting that I've been speaking pretty abstractly, wouldn't you say? I mean, it's all related to just the act of viewing here. I've been talking abstractly about the act of watching YouTube, and but I feel like I'm shifting gears a little bit right now because I'm starting to suspect that for me to continue on with this sort of like societal analysis at this moment might be a kind of defection on my deepest values. For instance, I'm finding myself presenting a narrative in that I'm kind of presenting some like an adversary in the world, and that adversary not being a personal one, but like a kind of broad set of ideologies. Like I'm positioning myself as adversarial to that like hegemonic worldview or whatever. And I do I guess I am thinking about myself in those terms at the moment. It's not true. But interestingly enough, it's like even the way that I'm presenting a narrative, I suspect as if I could do a better job at actualizing a potential form of being in the world as an alternative to the ills that I'm describing. And I suspect that there's a way for me to do that in this moment. If you'll pardon me for a moment. I got a whiz, and I'm going to see what I can do about not being devoured by bugs. So I suppose that what I've been saying it should be fairly easy to understand, fairly easy to say. I even suspect that you've probably already thought about these things. You probably already have at least some kind of intuitive sense of the ways in which media affects you emotionally and mentally and so on. I mean, I suppose, maybe I suppose I felt compelled to go on that sort of polemic, just in case there were any of you that hadn't thought about that weren't aware, which is also possible. But at this point, it's just that I have a sense that there's a greater opportunity here and let's just we might as well try and stay connected with what we've said so far. We might as well keep things continuous, because why not? Coherent to some degree. Like, so what am I proposing as an alternative to dopaminergic addictive relation to media and to the rest of life? I guess I think about it in the sense that I'd prefer to have a relatively stable serotonin level. Which, I don't know exactly when I'm feeling like I don't know exactly what aspects of my state have to do with each particular neurotransmitter. This is only knowledge that I've heard from somebody else, that there are these various neurotransmitters like serotonin, dopamine, endorphins, oxytocin, etc., that are associated with various emotional states, emotional and mental states. And yeah, so I guess I've heard and read about them, and so I make some linkage between those ideas. So it's like, it's like not like I've ever seen serotonin. It's not like I've ever seen a neurotransmitter. I mean, some of those compounds actually do exist outside of the human brain. Like, yeah, I think there's plants that contain serotonin. I don't think eating it actually has anything to do with its level in your brain. So I don't know. In some sense, I could I think I could look at. I think it might be like stinging nettles or something. that there's serotonin maybe contained in the compound that causes the sting when you touch it, but it's not like eating it has any effect on your own serotonin level, I don't think. So I mean, I'm realizing that it is kind of, it's kind of an abstract knowledge that I'm describing here, and by the way that I'm speaking about that, would imply that I might start getting into questions about episteme, like the nature of this knowledge at all. And so, yeah, I guess I'm feeling more aware at this time of very many levels that we could be addressing. Like I could be speaking in sort of an objective, empirical way about things like neurology and how it affects emotional states, using abstract concepts like neurotransmitters, and just by abstract I just mean a piece of knowledge that is, when we think about it, is in some way decoupled from like our first person experience. I mean, maybe there's some way to have some electrodes hooked up to your head to measure the amounts of various neurotransmitters coursing through your neurons at any given moment. So that I don't know, you could like have some knowledge, have like real-time knowledge of that as you are also experiencing firsthand. But I feel as if I'm increasingly coming into some urge to kind of let go of this this somewhat empirical mode of thinking. It's not that. It's not the empiricism that I'm finding any resistance to. It's the problem is that well, here's an attempt of positing what the problem might be, and that might be that I have a conception about my concept of walking and talking. That is the mental framework in which I'm encapsulating this experience that I'm having and that you're having. But this is, yeah, this is very obvious, I guess, that because of my memories of, wow, nice shrooms. Because of my memories of prior episodes of walking and talking, of my experience, I have this conception of some like radically different mind state that tends to come about, and because of that, it's like I think there's some kind of pattern in me that is seeking that. There's something that maybe almost wants to contrive some category of experience that I've created. And in some way I could say that right now I'm beginning to see glimpses, or that I could, the nature of my experience is changing in a way that I could see as aligning more with the mental category that I have, but at the same time what it feels like is a crumbling apart of a dissolution of the ability to categorize. Let me try and say that a little more clearly, I suppose, because, I don't know, why not try to say everything as clearly as possible? It's kind of like I found myself fairly rationally and coherently spelling out a version of reality, an angle on reality. And that was fine and all. But I began to experience it as like more of a just kind of a translative version of reality rather than a transcendent one. At least in terms of my own personal experience. I can't really speak for your experience of it. So for instance, I don't know, if you had never even considered the sorts of things that I was talking before, maybe it could have been a transformative synthesis of information for you. It's possible. But what I find also fairly likely is that maybe you have also developed your own mental frameworks for looking at some of the same aspects of the world that I have been talking about. And so you get just like a different viewpoint on them. But for me, this was, I don't know. I began to see the kind of the relativity of what I was saying. I don't know, it's still not true. But it's kind of like I kind of decided to abandon that path, and now I feel in some ways more confused. I feel a little more lost now. Also interestingly enough, this coincides with me being in geographically unfamiliar territory. This tends to happen a lot. That where I am mentally in these episodes, the characteristics of that correspond to the geography. So I've gotten into a territory where I'm not as familiar exactly where I am, and I'm trying actually to remember. I'm trying to kind of like remember as I go here all the turns that I've been making, so that I can find my way back the same way that I came. And I think I'm doing that with what I'm saying as well. That is, trying to hold some version of what's been said in my mind. So that some kind of sense of overarching sense could possibly be made here. Even if currently right now I don't feel like I'm making sense, or there's not a feeling right now of me speaking authoritatively on anything, or speaking about a subject even per se at the moment. I'm not talking about anything that I've studied at the moment. At least that I'm not consciously aware that I'm doing that. And I'm not at the moment consciously aware of, say, repeating information. Although, in the first 50 minutes or so, looking back retroactively on that period, the first 50 minutes or so of this video, which you might remember well as having this characteristic of seeming to speak in a slightly more authoritative tone, or that is from the position of I am relaying onto you information or a angle on reality that is valuable, is in your interest to understand. There's some of that. There was some of that going on. And now, in light of what I just said, I just now described an earlier portion of this episode of Walking and Talking. I in a way, I summarized it. But in that summary, I also shaped the reality of it to some extent. I mean, to the extent that you believe what I was saying. Like, I took an abstraction, which is, you know, an entire block of time that contained a complex amount of information, and I summed it up in a statement that cast it in a certain light. And, you know, what that really is kind of spinning it in a way. That's still one interpretation of that. And so in a sense, now it's as if I am still in a way like shaping my and your understanding of reality, but at least I seem to be doing it in a slightly more self-contained way, that is, keeping that localized to the more self-reflexive topic of this video itself. And in that way, I suppose that I'm hoping that maybe some light becomes shed both for you and for me. In like a realer sense on that process. That is, like, if I started off talking about it, maybe at some point I started off talking about it and eventually kind of realized I was doing it, that I was to some extent doing what I was talking about, and at various points becoming increasingly aware of that, or like aware of the kind of multiple ways in which I'm doing that. That is shaping our respective realities by the way in which we think of things, about things. And then I started to feel a recursiveness to that process, which I could kind of describe the experience of that as kind of like a whip. You know how like if you have a whip, you know everybody, surely you must have a whip laying around. And if you don't, I don't know what your problem is. But you know how you whip something, you make this kind of big curve that's moving slowly, and then as it gets to the end of the whip, it gets smaller and smaller, but speeds up, and then whoosh, makes a snap. It was some kind of experience like that. That's kind of like, I don't know. And now I find myself actually grasping backwards towards a moment that I remember. That is when I realized, when I kind of like experienced that recursiveness happening. It was a significantly different it was like I was snapped into something, a different way of a different type of experience. But now I'm like not in that type of experience, because I'm thinking about a different type of I'm thinking about that experience and wanting it. And so I'm not in that experience because I'm precluding it, because I'm in the experience of wanting. And so can I purposefully drop the wanting, you know? Can I stop wanting? And like all the Buddhists talk about. So I can just feel peace and clarity and just, presence. But that of course gets into the age-old paradox of wanting not to want. It's if you're a parent and your kid tells you they want something, you can always come back at them with the classic, it's nice to want things. But I'm perceiving myself at this moment still kind of clinging onto sorts of representation of myself that feel now superficial or fractional or fragmented. Or another way to put it is involved in the emotionally topographic texture that I associate with dopaminergic addiction. So, in other words, being drawn to, for instance, give sort of a charming, humorous anecdote like the parent saying to their kid, "It's nice to want things," which is kind of humorous and charming, but I feel like is not really the best, because that's not it doesn't feel substantially embedded in the core of the type of experience that I'm after, or perhaps to word it a little bit better is that that's not really seriously involved in what I perceive my most honest possible engagement with reality. Or I could say that diverts slightly from me most earnestly going towards truthfulness. And the reason that I say that it is representative of a dopaminergic, addictive emotional topography is that it's the sort of thing that would probably give you just like slight mental relief, as in something that's easy to understand. It's not that I'm intentionally trying to make anything hard to understand. In fact, I am striving to communicate as clearly as I can. But I am also trying to adhere to my own highest standard of the truth to be communicated. And I've been speaking for a few minutes now. About just one kind of small moment that happened a few minutes ago. And as I got to the end of talking about that, and kind of explaining it in a way that I feel is sufficient, it now feels important to me to move on and continue, I don't know, continue, but to try and actualize as honestly as possible what it is, the truth finding process that I've been describing. Am I doing it at all? It's actually like everything that I'm saying is not exactly it. It's all around it. It's all kind of precipitating outward from it. If I can even claim that, I'm not totally sure, but it's peripheral to it. Kind of, wow, yeah, I don't know. In the sense that everything is kind of peripheral to what at this point I have only sort of referred to as it, I guess. Pretty good, how are you?
Alrighty. Warm up.
I just had the experience of being lost mentally translate into the experience of being lost geographically again. A lot of shrooms out, but I'm defecting again. I'm like, I'm looking for something to hang on to. Mushrooms, you know, an object. Like, why am I even really fascinated? Am I even fascinated, or is this like, it's like another thing, you know? Like even knowledge about mushroom, like I could learn all the knowledge about this. I mean, I know that's edible. I could like take the time and harvest that coral mushroom and eat it. But why even, you know? It's part of the, yeah, I don't know. It's part of like the gravity of efflux. The attraction of solidity, of solidifying. So, for instance, the difference between the feeling of not knowing what you're doing and having a task or a conceptual framework on what you're doing that structures what you're doing. There's nothing wrong with that. What the hell am I talking about? And so in this moment, I am experiencing some of the discomfort of recognizing my own thought patterns and how just repetitive they are, including what I'm saying right now, and including what I'm saying right now, and including what I'm saying right now as being total patterns of walking and talking, and thus not feeling authentic, feeling disidentified. And even this very pattern of even the entire even the everything about this feels so painfully familiar to me. And it feeling painfully familiar means like that, like I'm just kind of like watching a process play out, as if I'm seeing something objectively that I would otherwise be identified with, that I would you know, that I would think I would thought that this was subjective. I thought this was subjectivity. All this thinking and talking. Isn't this the subjective me talking? Isn't this me here talking to you? But then I've shifted into this. It's like inevitably I can't help but see this talking to you as just going on without being a real subject, you know? Like I guess there is a subject present, I guess, that's seeing this. But even when I say that, I'm like, fuck. Because I can still recognize this as being an idea that I heard or read somewhere else, in some mysticism or something like that. Like it's as if I'm just kind of spouting off Vedanta. Or various types of Buddhism. Let me drink some water. I couldn't say I feel good here. I can't say I feel good. I felt good enough when I started. But this is what I do every time. I get confused. I feel lost for a while. I feel embarrassed. I see myself doing the same sorts of things that I've done every time. I talk about seeing myself, saying those things. I talk about I talk about becoming disidentified with the notions of self that I was previously thinking were myself. I talk about transpersonal states of awareness, and I seem to I apparently seem to like enter one as as we talk about subject object between you and me, the viewer, and the person on the video. It's all the same. It's the same every time. I'm making the same video over and over again. And maybe, I'll probably I'll go through a crisis of, like sort of a self-reflexive crisis about like not thinking the video's good, about thinking the video's really shitty, that I'm bringing you all down. I'll go through that crisis, and then somewhere towards the end of the video, I'll get through that, and it'll all make sense retroactively. That's how it goes every time. You don't have to watch the rest of this video. You know what's going to happen. You've seen it all before. Why even watch it? Don't you have something better to do? Obviously, I'm just going to be kind of spouting off the same rhetoric about selfhood that I always do. Just in just a slightly different form each time. Just a slightly different presentation. And I'll go through an emotional topography, and then at the end I'll appear to have some overarching perspective on it. We're entering into the crisis part of the plot arc. If you can't tell. If you didn't see that coming. It's just like, it's kind of like the comfort that you get from watching a sitcom, because it's going to have the exact same fucking emotional arc every time you watch it, just with like a different different dilemma each time. And so you get comfort from just going through a familiar dilemma, a familiar emotional arc that gives you some kind of simulacra of meaning every time. And that's what this is too. It's just 4 hours long. And with very low production values. A little bit more raw. You could say. And much more consuming of your time. Your precious time here on Earth. The limited time of your life. But maybe I can just kind of go on. I don't know. Like, I recognize the pattern so strongly that now I feel so disinterested in it. But then again, at the same time, I feel disinterested in like the idea of newness, you know. I don't at present have a compelling enough reason to drastically alter the format of this YouTube channel. It's like, you know, I realize it's shitty. I know it's stupid. I know it's deeply problematic in so many ways. Just, you know, and yeah. I'm still doing it. I'm still going through my patterns here. I'm still saying the same things that I say. Like, I was just about to talk about how I realize walking and talking is problematic. That what I'm doing here is problematic. And in this, like, kind of like, then I was going to go on and, like, expand that in the sense that life itself is fundamentally problematic. And then I caught myself, because I remember that's exactly the sort of thing that I would say. Like, I can't, I don't know. Like, coming up against the absence of, like, self-authoring. The absence of any real agent, you know. Not a real agent in the fundamental sense of, here is me, the locus of control. Choosing freely what I think and say and do. It's so weird being alive. Like, I have this question, like, what was there ever, like, some original creative moment, you know? We have this still tragically ubiquitous worldview of there being a humanoid creator God that made everything in an original act of creativity, an original act of authorship that, like all cause and effect, can be traced back to. But really, it doesn't make a lick of sense. Because who the hell made him? Who the hell made that, you know? Like something humanoid prefigured all of the world. I guess I understand the impulse. I understand the impulse to create that kind of mythology. Because human experience seems kind of primary, right? It seems primary, right? But then once I start to ask myself that, then I start to see through that a little bit, in that it feels that like that's actively being generated. That is, even the mental category of human experience, that's being actively created in each moment as an emergent phenomena. You know, the mental categorizing activity of thinking of oneself as a human, of categorizing all your perceptual experiences into a category of humanness that differentiate, against which you differentiate otherness. You know, we talk culturally, socio-politically a lot about the problems of othering with regard usually to other classes of people. And I think this all draws back to even just this fundamental act of othering that's inextricably linked to the action of selfing. Like, I guess in this moment, like I'm saying right now that I'm a human and this is human experience. But at the same time, that feels a little bit optional. I mean, I guess that sounds kind of nuts, but like, it's not the only thing that's going on. It's not the only way to look at things, I guess. I don't know if that's even true. I'm hearing myself talk and experiencing the talking not feel very coherent. I don't have a lack of faith that this present experience is valid. And if that goes for me, I think it goes for you too. With regard to the words that I'm saying, I don't really know what they're communicating or if there's really coherency here. And I guess I could say very genuinely that I simply don't know if what I'm doing is valid. I really don't know. And when I say that, I'm thinking about what I've been saying. Like there's some mental residue of what I've been talking about and how I've been talking, say in the past 20 or 30 minutes, I'm estimating. And my general perception of it is that it has been fairly disjointed and kind of lost feeling and kind of wandering and sort of kind of jumping between seemingly unrelated ways of looking at things without any rhyme or reason that I can discern. But now, as I'm describing that, like I do seem to perceive some coherency in the way that I'm describing it. And weirdly enough, it's like, okay, now at this moment, there seems to be some form of coherency that is enacted retroactively. And as I'm sure you might be able to predict, if you are at all familiar with this series, what I might say next. You probably you might know what I'm about to say, actually. Just think, like, if I just went to describing my own incoherency and then subsequently reflecting that in my description of incoherency there was coherency, what am I going to say next? You can predict it. It's that in the act of me describing my newfound experience of coherency, the opposite truth manifested itself, and that notion of coherency revealed itself not to be true, or its opposite, the opposite truth appeared. So it's like, I think if you watch enough of these episodes, you probably can just start to predict the types of things that I'm going to say, which is a little freaky. I said earlier that I genuinely don't know if what I'm doing is valid. And now I see that I have this pattern of always kind of questioning everything that I say, and everything that I say, I probably kind of automatically kind of like look for the opposite truth at the time that I say something. And so, like, I mean, I don't know if that's exactly what I'm doing, but when I was saying that I genuinely don't know if what I'm doing is valid, then at the same time the thought occurred that maybe it does seem rare for someone to actually persist at a very public activity in which that they are that kind of like openly doubtful of the validity of what they're doing. And so, like, maybe in that there's a certain kind of value, and in that a certain kind of validity. And so that, I mean, that's exactly the type of thinking that I do all the time in this. It's like, yeah, and so like that brings up this question for me. It's like, is this like is that motion of thought, that type of thought movement, like, is that an authentic movement towards truthfulness? Or is it kind of an unconscious pattern that's just perpetuating and has nothing to do with any higher, broader truth? Man, there are so many mushrooms out today. And of course, you can probably predict what I'm about to say next, which is perhaps that is a false dichotomy that I'm creating, or that a higher truth would be one that can encompass both of those perspectives. That being these perspectives being one, that this is a movement towards truth, and two, that it's just kind of an automatic process playing out. And so like a synthesis of that would be, you know, that this reality this reality, you know, the one that we're experiencing right now, is in a sense like an automatic unfolding process that you know, doesn't have like the type of like localized agency that we might typically feel as being an individual. And that yes, like many of the things that we kind of automatically tend to identify with as ourselves, as us, are in fact like mimetic patterns that play themselves out in a fashion that is just kind of like in accordance with cause and effect, that don't really need something like a true agency there, like creating them. You know, we can see that easily in the way that like cultural memes proliferate, that people imitate each other and ideas spread, and you know, the way that really stupid ideas spread, and really stupid behavior is spread, and etc., etc. It doesn't even have to be stupid, but a lot of it is. And then this other truth, this other perspective being, what is it? Oh yeah, that of it moving towards truth in a sense. And I think that's true. But it is also speaking in a temporalized way that is like placing truth in the future and looking at, for instance, our human evolution and the evolution of our human worldviews as getting closer to the real truth. And this is strangely enough, that is kind of like the base axiom of, say, the scientific rational worldview. The idea that there are fundamental truths already out there, independent of human awareness of them, and that through as time goes on and we kind of test different models of reality against reality, that we get closer to that truth, that our model will map increasingly well onto that truth. And I would say that, yeah, that is true. That is true, and also that is also just a worldview that is kind of like that is like on that timeline. You know what I mean? It's like it's as if that is a perspective from which, like from that perspective, like it's real and truthful, and that it's that is a perspective that is oriented towards truthfulness, and at the same time it could terminate itself. Not terminate itself, but transcend itself. That is, continue to follow that line of inquiry, that process of truth-seeking will actually eventually lead us towards recognizing the actual limited nature, or the relativism of even that worldview, that episteme, epistemology. I don't know whether to say episteme or I think episteme, not epistemology. Like you would follow that. So like, say you are coming from the rational point of view, okay? You're like, there's just saying something that seems so fundamental as like there is a reality that we're looking at, that we can see and observe and learn about, something that fundamental. And coming from that orientation, like just following that, just sticking to that, being true to that, does eventually lead to seeing outside even that paradigm, to the point where you even perceive that paradigm of perceiving as an object, as a component, as like another thing, like just one evolutionary stage of understanding among others. Like it comes back and sees itself. And so that kind of is related to what I was talking about before, of like the perception of the self being, on one hand, experiencing the self as this irrefutable subjectivity of like, this is I, obviously there's experience happening here, and at the same time, like at times like seeing it objectively, which like, everybody does this to some extent. Like everybody is like you can look at your past self and be like, I said something, but I really shouldn't have said that because I was really upset at the time, or I was really mad, so I wasn't really speaking very clearly or something. That's a form of like seeing the self as objective. It's like you're recognizing that that's something that I was identified with. Like I said that stuff and I felt it, and I probably even I meant it at the time. It's like I was pissed, and I felt the emotional reality behind what I was saying at that time. It was true when I was saying it, and now I'm looking back at it, and that's like a past self, and I don't feel that truth. I'm not experiencing the reality behind that. I'm seeing that as something different. I'm objectifying that manifestation of myself. So like we all do that to certain extents. And I guess I feel interested in the times when that's like happening very simultaneously and presently. Like seeing myself speak and like witnessing myself speak as an object, hearing words come out of my mouth and being like, oh, I'm hearing myself speak, and it's like not completely me. Like if there's something witnessing what's coming out of my mouth, then there's obviously there's also some other version of selfhood here. But at the same time, like what I'm saying, obviously having something to do with the self that I'm identified with. But it continues, like at this moment, I'm sitting between these two big moss-covered boulders, and at times experiencing what I'm saying as feeling a little new, feeling a little novel, feeling some element of discovery in what I'm saying, or that like feeling the sense of some synthesis coming about of my experience that has some newness in it for me. And so having this experience of there actually being some unknown aspect of reality that is manifesting, or feeling like there is something not fully formed to look for, and which lets me feel a little bit excited about life, that there's more to, there's the idea that there's something to come that I haven't experienced already. There's something different that may occur, that myself is not finitely authored, is not a finished book. And at the same time, I can also perceive in what I'm saying and how I'm speaking much of the known, or much of what I am familiar with, what I can recognize as patterns of thought that I've thought before, that I've heard, that I've consumed from the outside world. And so it's not just one or the other, but paradoxically, I can kind of say that I do really appreciate the experience of feeling like I'm like more vividly in that kind of nexus, or in that more like the self that I'm identified with being more accurately located in at this point where stuff is where I'm experiencing something manifest that is new, that is not just the same. And while I say that, and I seem to be drawing a distinction between, for instance, this moment and other more mundane moments of life, the falsehood of that kind of reveals itself. And I realize, like, is that ever truly not present? Is there actually some other time, some other way of being where that's like not real? I mean, we can, like, this what I'm saying now, like the tone of what I'm saying contrasts markedly with what I was saying, I don't know, maybe it was like 40 minutes ago, where I was expressing this exasperation at being just so boring, so bored and familiar with what I was doing and what I was saying and the ways I was thinking, and yeah, feeling bored by just recognizing the same patterns of thought repeat themselves. And even holding a perception that, like, it would always be that way, that there's not a real substantial agent here that like self-authors and like, you know, chooses and creates what patterns of thinking to set in motion. And I still think that's true. But I don't feel at all like oppressed by that, because what I'm seeing now is more that, like, in the absence of like an individual cordoned off agent, in the absence of, you know, an individual human agent, an individual me that's the real author here, setting things into motion. What feels more true to me is the interconnectedness with everyone and everything else, and the fact that this present experience and this line of thinking does originate in, you know, what I would ordinarily term the outside world, the external world, in all this external information influences, memes. I mean, and it's like hard to say memes now because everybody thinks you're talking about pictures with words on them. But I mean it in the more the preceding Richard Dawkins' use of it. In that, like, what I would ordinarily think of me is just composed of all of that stuff. And it is actually heartening when I consider the possibility that there seems to be any kind of signal at all, any kind of sense at all. If everything that I'm composed of is just like everything else, then I might be suspected to think that's all noise, you know? Like, how is there any signal in the noise? And so that there is a process going on here. There is a process going on like just the fact that there is some sense making happening with regards to this experience in the context of the whole world is remarkable. It's like even the notion that something like noise and signal can be perceived and apparently discerned between. Apparently. The fact that there is something that we can talk about as meaning. That you understand what I'm saying to some degree, on some level, even just on the basic level of like you speak this language, you understand this language. And not only do you understand this language, you are receiving some kind of meaning here. Some kind of meaning is happening. And it's not only say like the words that I'm saying, like the thoughts that are happening here. It's also there's also the thoughts that are occurring concurrently in your mind, in your experience, along with your sensation and perception of and conception of the words that you are hearing from here, out here. Is even though, you know, that's a sort of thing we just always overlook and take for granted, it's when I really look at that, it's kind of remarkable to that it is like a kind of evidence of a meaning that is not reliant on the notion of individual agency. But I guess yeah, I don't know. Like still, what I'm describing continues to kind of strike me as so obvious. It's yeah, I don't know. This is these are the sorts of things that I say here on Walking and Talking. That things I talk about things that are so fundamentally obvious that we never think about them, I guess. And so here we are now, and like I felt some options occur to me for how to proceed talking, of course. And one category of those options would involve kind of creating a narrative of like where we currently sit in this episode, to kind of create a summary of where we've been, what our trajectory has been, like what just what sorts of perspectives on reality have we moved through in this time. And to by doing that, create some kind of map of what we're doing here, where we might be headed, and to maybe, you know, ascribe some overarching meaning to what we're doing here in Walking and Talking, or like particularly in this episode. And so some of those versions of the narrative occurred to me as a possible way of proceeding. And they also appeared to me as being optional. So for one, let's take an example of like maybe the first prominent sort of like summarizing narrative that occurred to me in my mind about what's going on here. And I'll just go ahead and relate that summary that kind of occurred to me. And that would be kind of like, so like we started off in a fairly like, I think very conventional mode of thinking and talking about sort of like the addictive dynamics of YouTube viewership, and setting out a what could be described as a somewhat polemic narrative with the moral program, and at some point doubt arising and going into a longer, not a longer, but a period of confusion, we could call it, of being, of a felt experience of unsureness of what we were doing, why we were here, what is the meaning, what should we be doing, is this valid, you know, the various felt embarrassments and self-critiques of this video, along two of them being, one of them being the recognition of its kind of like rote repetitiousness of patterns of thinking, and then the other one being a critique of the kind of wandering, disjointed, incoherent nature of what I was saying. Interestingly, both of these seem to be like somewhat opposite characteristics. And then now I perceive like a different a subsequent phase of this video, which I'm sort of demarcating by the act of sitting on this rock here and being in this location between these two boulders, in which preceding dichotomies that felt problematic achieved a kind of synthesis that resolved their problematic nature and at the same time like even reconciled like the felt experience of their problematicness, that is like reconciling that uncomfortable experience of feeling the self-criticality of being rote or being incoherent. And recognizing it, so you know, and recognizing I don't know, just recognizing those modes of being as just existing without like a value judgment on them, and seeming to flow more easily into a way of thinking and speaking that isn't really relying on value judgments. And feeling, I'd say, you know, feeling resolution, and that resolution I feel like what that comes from is the emotional level. So like still being able to perceive this dichotomy between, you know, like I was saying earlier, like self as object and self as subject. And not experiencing that as dissonance. I mean, I guess because it's like now we can see those as just two kind of like alternate expressions of a whole, a relative whole. And so like emotionally, like they don't carry this experience of dissonance. And so like, okay, everything that I'm saying right now, like don't forget, like is contained within a what I'm deeming like an optional summary, an optional kind of narrative summary of like where we are at right now in this video. And so this is all leading up to what occurred to me as like sort of a temptation now to cast the present state as positive in relation to previous parts of the video. Like that kind of emerged as an option here. Like, and sure, that makes sense in that like so like I felt tempted to categorize my present experience, or at least I did when I began describing these different options for narrative summaries, as in a positive valence. To describe my present reality as without emotional tension, without emotional dissonance, and along with that, this mentation, this verbal mentation process, this linguistic thing that's going on here, as feeling like it is flowing with less resistance. And that's a true, that is not a false interpretation of reality. But in another sense, to be purveying the present reality in a positive valence does feel limited, in that it necessarily posits this other, it necessarily kind of like creates an other, like negative valence, an other negatively valenced reality, a negatively valenced state that I am projecting into the past. And when I project it into the past, it's like, it's also kind of necessarily like posits it as a possible future as well. And that process of dichotomizing the present versus the past and the future is the process by which we kind of self-create the felt experience of the linearity of time. And in doing that, we self-create the problems for ourselves with the ultimate one being death. It's like we create such problems as our own mortality. When we self-create the necessary components of mortality, which are time and the self. And anytime we other, like, and I know that like when I say other as a verb, that there may be associations that you have of that are more kind of like social justice oriented, and it's what I'm saying is very related to that, but like I feel in a more and not like any specific social sense, like, and I mean other in the very fundamental, like, mental action of individuating, of dichotomizing the self and the other. So anytime we other, you know, anytime we like mentally create the other, then we mentally create the self, and then when we mentally create the self, there are limitless, there are boundless problems. There's always that problem of death. Which is, you know, that is a mental thing. In a sense, you know, in this whatever, in this however provisional reality that we're creating here in Walking and Talking. But yeah, to return to what I was saying a little bit ago, like, like this temptation to so I think there are like multiple levels in which I could categorize and place like valuations on experience. But in order to do that, I also have to be, mentally cordoning off such discrete experiences, like into objects, into I have to be categorizing in a way that I'm placing distinctions in between, like this experience and that experience, like the past 20 minutes versus an hour ago, as if they were not just completely connected to each other. And in order to do that, I have to also be actively engaged in creating time, like for myself, like thinking about 20 minutes ago, thinking about an hour ago, and to what extent am I granting those ideas reality? Like the 20 minutes ago, like to what extent is that real? But and so, like, I'm saying that I'm kind of saying that I have a suspicion or a distrust of like mentally categorizing certain experiences as positive ones versus otherwise, because then I'm creating this dichotomy that doesn't seem necessary, and like the and I think, I think there's a lot of merit to that, and legitimacy to say that, like, the more fervently I see certain things as good, and like the more solidity I give to that mental category of things, then conversely, I'm also going to be doing the same thing with things that I categorize as bad, probably, like the badness of something, or the wrongness of something is going to feel that much more real and solid to me, and like truth. And like there's a real recognition of the dichotomous and limited nature of that way of seeing reality, and that in expressing that, I'm assenting towards a way of experiencing reality that I could describe as like more fluid, or more ambiguous, or less, I would hope, like less reductive, and just like with more overall integration, to be more cognizant of the interconnectedness of everything, including the interconnectedness between myself and the rest of the world, and for instance, when I perceive a wrong, when I perceive another person as being bad, or another behavior as being bad or wrong or not belonging in the world, like to actually be able to perceive my own actual involvement in that, and that wrongness or evil that I'm perceiving as being as existing in myself. So like, you know, assenting towards that, what I think as a more integrated understanding of reality, and yet somewhat paradoxically, I kind of can't help but to be valencing that very thing as positive, as opposed to the more dichotomous reality that I'm talking about as being negative relative, you know, relatively negative, or relatively not as whole, not as holistic. And so, like, you know, it's very funny, you know, to me in this moment to realize that, like, that it's like I can't seem to help but continue to create and manifest the very structure of reality that I seem to be describing as lower, or as a less whole worldview. And it's like I'm creating that structure of reality as I talk about it, as as I talk about something else, as I talk about an other reality. Like I'm right. I have been this whole time, like, engaged in an othering of an entire worldview, an entire reality. I've been othering reality this whole time. and I can't. And I also have to admit that, like, that I can't help but be positively valencing, like, my current experience, at least on an emotional level, because, like, if I'm trying to describe my very current felt experience, it's like I would use words like openness and freedom, I guess, and just like a general sense of well-being, that a sense of well-being that's even encompassing, like, the types of things, the types of problems like death and mortality, and like, and that's like for me, that leads towards encompassing the types of problems, like large scale things that we think of as problems, and like being able to like, hopefully, like, you know, hold all of that truth, to hold all of that truth as real, and not, like, diminish any amount of suffering that's going on but also to be able to really see it as change, and to see change as being totally fundamental to reality. And for that to be all integral, to what's unfolding here, and I'm very tempted to say that, like, I feel very tempted right now to speak of reality as having just a very fundamental and inherent goodness to it, of that being like an all pervading quality of reality. That is a goodness so all encompassing and so fundamental that it even that even is big enough to hold all of the suffering that exists. And and when I hear myself like say that sort of thing, and when I experience myself like feeling that, um so of course there's this other skeptical voice in my head that's very rightly remembers all these other times in life when I'm like, holy fucking shit, there's so much suffering. This is so shitty. This is so fucked up. My life is so fucked up. I'm doomed. I'm gonna die. Life is hard. My body's gonna keep decaying and be less and less comfortable to live in. Things in the world seem so intractably fucked. There are just so many people that I can conceive of living in the world with lives that are way more fucked than mine. I mean, from my perspective, like, there are situations being so much more limited. And I'm so I'm also saying that there's also there also very much seems to be this other truth, and an exterior to now that I can posit by my mental action and I can project myself into that exterior, and myself in that exterior can mentally categorize this moment, this experience of, say, walking and talking as a conceptual category of experience, and can categorize this as being a just a partial and relative view on reality that's like, you know, like say, okay, so I'm like, I'm currently, you know, let's go ahead and like I'll project myself into this external me that's like, you know, at home or walking somewhere or driving or eating food, you know, doing life, and has some thought occurs to me about walking and talking, some based on memory and based on the question of, should I do it again? When should I do it? Is it and the continual kind of like questions of, should I keep doing it? Is this like a valid thing to keep doing? Is this worth doing? And you know, not seeming to be I can very much like recognize, like, not seeming to be in contact with as nuanced and as open feeling and as peaceful feeling and of a reality as I feel I am experiencing now. So and yet that is still a version of reality that I'm creating right now. The version of reality where linear time and the continuity of selfhood are like fundamental, are like fundamentally real. And it's like I can remember, I think I am remembering right now. Wow, like I was going to say that I think I am remembering now, like the experience of thinking the sorts of thoughts as follows. Like when I'm doing like daily life as a category, I don't know, walking over to my garden or something, or like cooking food or something, or getting food, something like that, or like trying to make some kind of decision via email or something like that. or so thinking the sorts of thoughts as follows. Of like, I am in a situation in which my individuation feels kind of concrete, or like, maybe let's put a little nuance on this. Like, okay, I'm perceiving that there's a lot of mental activity going on right now, that is actuating self other understanding of the world. And underlying that thought being kind of a feeling of that being limiting, or like some kind of, maybe like persistent, like some, like in the background, maybe like goes under the radar sometimes, or gets a little clouded over by things, like, but in the background, persistent notion that there is a much wider open reality that you have access to. If you do manage to, like, put, like, to like arrange your material existence in the most conducive way, and it's like, it's obviously paradoxical the way that I'm talking about it, because I'm talking about, like, I'm talking about like a physical, empirical, material reality, and like that very much necessitates, like, self and other, like, you individual person, like, you got to get your life in order, and in order enough to create for yourself the conditions in which you can come into a way of experiencing reality in which that shit doesn't have the solidity that it otherwise does, and in which, like, that material reality, like, loses its material reality, that the self-otherness, like, loses materiality, and that's a complete paradox. That's a complete paradox. Like, I can say for sure, like, some hiker comes walking through here and says hello to me, that I am going to be, like, in a different state temporarily, that it's like, okay, then I am going to be, like, relating as self to other, and then even that I posited that reality, like, implies that material, that, like, a material, empirical reality that involves self other, like, that I posit, like, that a hiker can come up here and talk to me, like, in just in that mental activity of, like, proposing that, positing that possibility. It's like I'm activating that reality, that way of seeing things. That's funny. Is that right after I finished saying that, I heard some laughter like off in the distance. Right when I said that, like I've been sitting on these rocks for a long ass time and have not heard any sign of other humans that I'm aware of, or maybe I didn't notice it because I was busy ranting, and then and then I start to describe the possibility of an other appearing, and as soon as I do that, an other appears in my sensory awareness, that is, or the evidence of an other. So I hear some laughter in the distance. Wow. Yeah, I don't know. It's like, it's so strange. It's so fucking mysterious. It's so fucking mysterious, and that like, and that it almost like that in a sense like like individuation like feels kind of optional to me, like uh but yet it's not. I just feel like I have the experience now as if like as if as if any kind of like positing ultimate reality as being anything other than exactly what you see right now on the surface is like a mistake and missing something. And I realized I didn't exactly like describe to you like the mental process that led to that, exactly that statement right there. It may have been slightly non sequitur, but nonetheless. Like the feeling like that there is no like missing reality. There is no like there is no like just wrong or invalid experience of reality. Like, you know? And like that applying to like you at any other time, and that applying to any other being. And yet at the same time, like exactly what I am describing like necessarily posits a false or limited understanding of reality. So I am engaged still in creating yet another dichotomy of, you know, I guess we could call it like completeness and incompleteness, or perfection and imperfection. just then I felt like I noticed like I've been saying like dopaminergic a lot in this episode. I don't know. Actually, I heard somebody say that word and I liked how it sounded. But let me try and come up with a better word to describe what I'm talking about. And they're just being like a gravitational precipitation or a good feeling efflux or a pleasant solidification, a pleasurable solidification or something. So I described at another time, I think in this video, like sort of the desire to like grasp onto something solid, or just like, you know, a solid categorical framework for experience. So like, you know, I see a mushroom, like a mushroom, you know, and it's like, okay, and that's like a familiar mental categorization for my experience. And so like some kind of provisional form of solidity in my experience that I might grasp for if there would otherwise be an uncomfortable feeling of lostness. Yeah, like an unpleasant orientation towards the like solubility of experience. And so, you know, what I think might frequently occur in these walking and talking episodes is, you know, like a fairly typical arc to these things might be that I'm coming from like, I'm starting off in some fairly conventional mode of thinking about things and talking, and as I go on, that's kind of starts to break itself up through things like doubt and self-criticism, or yeah, I don't know, like self-inquiry, into a more unsure space, and then which is often hard, or you know, there's the experience of difficulty in that at first, and then getting through the difficulty, there can be the experience of that unsureness, uncertainty, or but then it's like it's no longer negatively emotionally valenced, and then it becomes something that you would more accurately describe as openness, or like solubility of experience, or fluidity, or freedom, or something like that. Openness. And then from that type of state, there can be like a gravitational pull towards like sort of like an emotional like solidification around something. So like for instance, my temptation to like categorize this experience into one of a positive valence, and like, you know, manifest like a narrative of my experience as being like a good one. So like, so maybe I categorize it as like, oh, I worked through some difficulties, or I really dug in deep with my thinking here, or overcame some like conceptual problems that I have, or I worked through some emotions. Uh, I I I successfully moved myself from a place of self-doubt and self-criticality, to one of more self-assurance and meaning and having a better understanding of where I'm going in life, that sort of thing. Or even just on the basic level of like being like, okay, I feel better right now. Like this is a better feeling than before. And to like, so there's that exists as like a temptation, like that has some kind of like attraction to it. There's an attractor to that too, and um, but I guess what I want to point out in that type of action or experience or whatever it is, it's like not like a tangible action. It's like, I don't know, experiential action or something like that. What I want to point out in that is like uh, the interplay of like of the mental action of that and the emotion or actually perceived emotion. Because what I'm thinking of, what I'm currently thinking of emotion as being is actually like a mental categorization of sensation. Like like if I'm describing like a bad emotion, an uncomfortable emotion, it's I'm talking about it and I'm describing it. Um, there's both these mental processes involved and there's physical sensation. But if I can kind of look at both of those things, it's not like the physical sensation is inherently bad or negative, like without the mental categorization of such. And I'm not like, this is not to denigrate emotion at all. It's like, or to like say that it's totally illusory or unnecessary. It's like, so like, you know, you feel bad about something, there's a reason for that. There's self-preservation utility in that. Or like, you know, just other types of like purpose for that that are much harder to understand and categorize. Now, let me just collect myself for a moment and remember what the hell are the multiple trains of thought that I'm on right now. So like, basically, I'm still kind of describing like a paradoxical nature of reality and of experience. So and a very obvious one is that is kind of like the necessity of a totally linear conception and experience of time, and like utilitarian type of thinking, or just like task-oriented, goal-oriented thinking that is completely necessary, say for instance, for me to get myself like out here in this environment, to just like you know, carve out a time of day for me to come and walk and talk and record it for 4 hours. All the very particular tasks and just conditions necessary for that to occur, for this to occur. And yet at the same time, like, having an experience that that shows that that task-oriented mode of thinking and the linear time mode of thinking to be very partial viewpoints of reality, and that to be a very real experience of you know, I'm experienced that partiality of that mode of being in as real a way as anything else, as real as anything. And so that's one way of looking at paradox. And this other thing is that I started to talk about how, like, and related to this, I started to talk about how, like, individuation feels optional. And so what is individuation? That's like, I'm thinking of that as being just the experience of being an individual self, like, as opposed to the rest of the world. Being an individual, being a person, or a being, whatever. And what leads me to suggest that that feels optional is that I'm observing in this moment how, like, I'm observing, and it feels very real. Every way in that, like, every mental activity is like is kind of creating reality, in a way that it's like it doesn't have to. And so, like, just like on a fairly easy level, it's like it's fairly easy to see how, like, different narratives of our lives, like, just do kind of create a different reality for us. So, like the example of, like, when you're angry about something and you think one way about a thing, and then, like, a little bit later you're not angry about the thing and you think totally differently about that. Those are, it's like you have just gone through two totally different realities. Like, your reality just changed. Like, and it's like what seemed like a full reality, you know? It's like if you're angry about something, when you are angry about something, it's not just nothing, you know? It's like you're not going to be angry if you don't perceive some reason for it as real, you know? If that's not the reality that you're perceiving, you know? Like, it's like in one sense, maybe we want to say that like anger is like a mistake, or like a failure to see the interconnectedness of things or something, or like a failure to recognize some aspect of yourself or something like that, or whatever. And okay, maybe that's true or something, but at the same time, like, that experience of anger is really real and really connected to your experienced reality, and so you can't totally dismiss it or denigrate it. You know, you can't totally denigrate that experience as being real. And then also, that anger is not going to last forever, and there will be some other time when you are seeing reality differently, and you're looking back at that time when you're angry and being like, well, that perspective wasn't or isn't the full reality as I understand it now. So that's just like kind of like an example of the way that like various things, like your narratives around things and your emotions, like, change and kind of create your reality. And but then it goes deeper and deeper than that. It goes like levels deeper than that, to even things that seem more fundamentally real, like you know, an object, like say that I don't know. Let me think of a good example. Like things that, like, we observe things that seem more fundamentally real than, say, for example, our fleeting emotions. But we can come to realize that even those seemingly solid and fundamentally real observations are not so. And there's a total like history of that happening, you know? Like, think of all the things that the human race once thought was true that seem like total nonsense now. Like the you know, just like an easy example is that we generally accept that the Earth revolves around the sun, and yet a few hundred years ago, if you said that, people would look at you like you're fucking nuts. Like, look at the fucking sky. Obviously, the sun is revolving around us. Are you fucking blind? Look, it starts over there and it goes over there. What the hell are you talking about? Us revolving around the sun, you know? It's like, it's so obviously observably that the sun goes from over there, every single day, like clockwork, literally. Uh, you know, that's something that, like, if you put yourself in that mind state, it's like, of course, that's like a fundamental observable reality, and yet it's not. And so, like, but like that applies to everything, and it applies to the immediate now. And so maybe we take something else like yeah, I don't know, like we could take, for example, like when earlier in this video I my observed reality of myself was as kind of like stuck in rote patterns of thinking and speaking, and as not being connected to, like, so some kind of like any kind of like creative source, um, or newness, or like the unknown or something. And then upon further observation, that reality kind of broke apart, and yeah. Yeah, it's like having an experience of not only just like selfhood or individuation, like not just like going beyond on just like uh you know, dissolving the illusion of individual self. Like we've talked a lot about that, but even going to the point of like reality at all, like that there is something at all, and recognizing yeah, I don't know, just like recognizing all the types of activity that are just actively going on, like right there, right now, that are creating this reality. And I just mean, so like all mental activity, from the conceptions that we have, which we've kind of talked a lot about how mutable those are, and how big a role those play in leading towards like seeing everything as solid, seeing ourselves as solid people, and like, you know, turning our reality into like a kind of like a hard truth to butt up against. But beneath that level of conception, also like perception, just that is like take the sun example, like the sun moving across the sky. Like, so is that a conception or a perception? It's like feels a little bit like a gray area to me, like whether that's a perception or a conception, which like kind of lends support to the idea that there's not exactly a fine dividing line between percept and concept. That like maybe like concept is kind of like a big complex percept, or a web of related percepts or something like that, or like say the way that like technology has extended our capabilities of observation, and just how much that's changed our reality by extending our perceptions, by changing our perceptions. But just in a more like, even like immediate sense, in a more immediate sense, like the mutability of perceptions I want to talk about. I'm trying to think of a good example. Well, let me just jump to an example of sensation. Okay, this is like sensation perception borderline. So like I'm perceiving my hand here, right? And what does that mean for me to perceive my hand? It means that there is some different sensation here that I am mentally categorizing into hand. So I see my hand. That means there's some light. There's light sensation, and kind of automatically there's a mental categorization, you know, a mental like decoding or organizing or whatever of that perceptual information, or no, sensual information into a percept. The percept being like the hand, the sensation being just like, I don't know, like what is the pure like data of light entering your eyes or something like that. And then there's also the physical sensation. So like what I feel coming from my hand. But as I talk about that, like those can become, there's the option to like decouple those, you know, like I feel something, I can say I feel something, and then I can see something. But while I'm doing this, I also do feel like really that there is a mental activity involved for me to say that what I'm feeling and what I'm seeing are my hand, you know? And of course it's also true that you're going to be like, you know, that we're going to be like, well, sure, go ahead and think about it that way if you want, but like when your hand's on a hot stove burner, you're not going to be acting like that. You're not going to be acting so optionally. And you're right. You're absolutely right. And so like I guess this is, you know, this is just another kind of like paradox, or another manifestation of the same paradoxical nature coming up, like that. Say like you can, especially in meditation or something, you can observe your sensation in a way where you can further kind of decouple it from perception and conception, decouple it from all those mental narratives, and and you can get to a point where it's like you get rid of actually the mental category of sensation, even, because like I mean, so for instance, like maybe you can detect, like in what I'm talking about, like the fuzzy boundaries between, say, sensation, perception, and conception, like that they all actually like are interplaying with each other to kind of, it's like they're kind of like necessitating each other, if that makes any sense. Like for me to say, be like I'm seeing and feeling my hand, it's like the sensation, perception, and conception are all necessarily involved in that statement, you know? Like even for me to say something like I'm feeling, like that involves the mental conception of I, the mental conception of like my hand, and the mental conception of like feel. And yet, and that if you were to kind of like let all of that kind of like disperse, or just like relax, or kind of dissolve into the actual reality, then it's like you can kind of like you can let all of that go. To where, and it's like, this is when I say that, I'm not implying a loss, because, you know, it's not like reality doesn't just, well, I don't know, like it doesn't just like disappear. Like it's not like for it to be a loss and for it to disappear, that requires actually imagination, imagining like some non-experience, some like it requires like a reality without experience. You know what I'm saying? Like this is like the problem of death. It's like, why is death bad unless we're kind of like creating a world without experience in it, that and that seems bad and seems scary, when it's like what we're identified with is the individual selfhood that is like wrapped up in linear time and has mortality and will, you know, disappear or like, you know, more realistically change drastically into something that is less recognizable to that limited conception of self. Pardon me. Sorry, I'm sorry, I'm peeing while I'm talking because I guess I want to keep talking. I pee on this moss so it's not as loud. What was I talking about? This is inappropriate, I know. Sorry, I forget my manners sometimes. I forget. Occasionally, I might lapse on the dictates of polite society. I mean, I guess like what I'm getting at seems to be like summarizable as some fairly familiar type of like Eastern mystical statement of saying that what really is fundamental doesn't go anywhere. Doesn't even change. Doesn't even change. But weirdly enough, anything that is appearing to be solid will change and will go away in the form that one recognizes. Because even recognizing a thing as like having inherent something, I don't know. I'm obviously just going off on emptiness that's been talked about a lot before. But it's again like paradoxical in that I don't know. Like I want to say that like what is most fundamentally true and real is that which like is the most fundamentally like empty of, I don't know, what we would call substance or something like that, or continuity, or just like even I don't know, yeah, like substance. And then like everything would, I don't know. I can't anymore. I can't. It is exactly time to stop. It is the perfect time to stop. I just can't. And we're at the correct time too. This is magic. This is magic. I can't. Give me some money on Patreon. Just give me some money. Give me some money before I start to cry. Okay, I can't even. Bye. I can't even.